So here on the table, I have three of the most popular mid-size power stations. Over here we have the Anker C1000, then we have the Bluetti AC180, and we have the EcoFlow Delta 2. Now, one of the most common questions that I get from my viewers is which model should you choose? If you look at the specs on paper, they are very similar. For example, each one of these models has a lithium iron phosphate battery with around 1,000 watt hours of capacity. Each one has an 1800 watt pure sine wave inverter. They all have smart app connectivity. They have good warranties, USB ports, DC output, but I think I've found a way to determine which one is the best. Over the last couple weeks, I have been extensively testing each one of these power stations to get their true performance. I do not want to do a head-to-head comparison based on the specifications on the box. I've come up with a 16-point comparison sheet based on performance and important features, and each one of those lines, whatever power station does the best, it'll get a point. And as we move down to the bottom of the sheet, hopefully we will have a total score, and whatever one comes out with the most points will be crowned the winner. Now up on the screen, you'll see our first set of tests for the AC inverter performance. Now during this test, we'll be seeing if the inverter can handle the max rated output. We'll be testing the fan noise level. We'll be testing the pure sine wave output. We'll also see what voltage the inverter puts out. After that test, we'll do a UPS cutover test and also test the usable capacity with the AC inverter. Let's get started with each power station. So starting with the Anker C1000, I connected up an 1800 watt load to the inverter and it was running this load just fine. Looking closer at the oscilloscope, it was a pure sine wave output at 122 volts with 60 hertz. Now under this max load, the fans were fairly loud at 62 decibels, and here's what they sounded like. I then moved on to testing the Bluetti AC180 with the same 1800 watt load. It was running it just fine. Checking with the oscilloscope, it was a pure sine wave output as well, right at 121 volts and 60 hertz. And the fans are much more quiet on the Bluetti AC180 at 51 decibels. Here's what those fans sounded like. Now what about the EcoFlow Delta 2? I connected up the same 1800 watt load and it was running it without any problems. Looking closer at the oscilloscope, it did also have a very clean sine wave, 122 volts, 60 hertz, and the fans are also quite loud on the Delta 2 at 60 decibels, and here's what those fans sounded like. Now a quick rundown on the AC inverter performance for each of these. They were all able to pull the 1800 watts consistently with a pure sine wave output of at least 121 volts. However, the biggest difference was the fan noise. So I want to play those clips side by side so you guys can tell the difference. Now each one of these power stations does have a UPS mode or acts as an uninterruptible power supply, but how fast is the actual cutover? Well, I tested this on each one. The Anker C1000, I measured 19.2 milliseconds. On the Bluetti AC180, I measured 8.7 milliseconds. And on the EcoFlow Delta 2, I measured 19.8 milliseconds. So after measuring each one of these, the Bluetti AC180 definitely came out on top with 8.7 milliseconds. Now the final test that we're doing on the AC inverter for each one of these power stations is an actual discharge test to see the usable capacity. So when I was testing the Anker C1000, I got a total of 910 watt hours. Testing the Bluetti AC180, I got a total of 990 watt hours. And the EcoFlow Delta 2, I got a result of 850 watt hours. So when you compare these side by side, you can see the Bluetti AC180 has the most capacity due to its slightly larger battery. So let's pause it right here and do a breakdown of the current points. The Anker C1000 and the Delta 2 are both tied at 3 points. The Bluetti AC180 is in the lead with 6 points. Now there are a bunch of tests to go, so we'll have to see how this turns out. So moving forward with the DC output testing, what's the maximum DC wattage we can get from each model? How many USB ports does each one have? Do they support wireless charging? And what's the usable capacity we can get via the DC output? Connecting my battery load tester up to the Anker C1000, I was able to pull 138 watts before it shut down from being overloaded. Now on the Bluetti AC180, I was able to get 129 watts before it shut down, and on the EcoFlow Delta 2, I was able to get 143 watts, so the most power was on the Delta 2. Speaking of USB ports for each model, the Anker C1000 has 2 USB-C ports, one 100 watt port and one 30 watt port, and 2 USB-A ports. The Bluetti AC180 has one 100-watt USB-C port and 4 USB-A ports, and the EcoFlow Delta 2 comes out on top with 2 USB-C 100-watt ports and 4 USB-A ports. Now for usable capacity, I was able to discharge each one of these using my battery load tester, and these were the results of each of those tests. I was able to get 946 watt-hours of capacity on the Anker C1000. The Bluetti AC180, I was able to get 985 watt-hours, and the EcoFlow Delta 2, 870 watt-hours. So again, we have the most capacity coming from the Bluetti AC180 due to its slightly larger battery. Now up on the screen, you're going to see a tally of the points so far in this comparison. The Anker C1000 has 3 points, the Bluetti AC180 has 8 points, and the EcoFlow Delta 2 has a total of 5 points. Moving on to our next testing section, it's going to be based on charging performance. How fast do each of these charge via AC wall charging? Do they have adjustable AC wall charging speeds? What's the maximum DC or solar input on each model? And do they support dual charging input? Let's find out. Now each one of these power stations support internal fast wall charging. They all come with a charging cable and there are no external charging bricks required. Now I wanted to test the fastest speed for each one. The Anker C1000 charged at around 1000 watts. The Bluetti AC180 charged briefly at 1400 watts and then averaged down around 1200 watts, and the EcoFlow Delta 2 peaked out at around 1200 watts input. Now each of these do support adjustable AC charging speeds via the Smart app. Now what about the maximum DC or solar input on each one of these power stations? Keep in mind each of these have a 60 volt cutoff, so putting solar panels in series will be an issue on each one of these. Now for the Anker C1000, it's rated at 600 watts, and I was able to get the full 600 watts input. The Bluetti AC180 is rated at 500 watts, and I was able to hit that. And the EcoFlow Delta 2 is also rated at 500 watts, and I was able to hit that as well. So if you're looking for the most DC or solar input, the Anker C1000 is going to be the way to go. Now I also wanted to test dual charging input from AC and DC input at the same time, and the Anker C1000 did not accept dual charging. It had a preference to AC charging only. When testing the Bluetti AC180, it did accept dual charging, and it gave a priority to solar or DC input first, so that's really cool. The EcoFlow Delta 2, when testing dual charging, did not allow dual charging. It had a preference to AC charging only. So out of all 3 of these, the Bluetti AC180 accepted dual charging, and it had a preference to solar or DC input first. So up on the screen, you'll see that we have 3 testing sections completed. And tallying up the points for each of these comparisons, the Anker C1000 has a total of 5 points, the Bluetti AC180 has a total of 11 points, and the EcoFlow Delta 2 has a total of 7 points. We only have 1 section to go, so let's see what happens. Now, are each of these power stations compatible with expansion batteries? If you look at the side of the Anker C1000, there is an expansion battery port where you have the ability to connect up 1 additional battery for a total capacity slightly over 2100 watt-hours. Now for the Bluetti AC180, unfortunately there is no expansion battery port on this model. However, you can use Bluetti's expandable batteries for other power stations with a special adapter, and you can plug that into the DC charging port on this model to get longer run times, but it doesn't function like a real expansion battery. Now on the EcoFlow Delta 2, you do have an expansion battery port on the side of the power station where you can connect up 1 additional battery for a total capacity slightly over 2000 watt-hours. Now what about Smart app connectivity? Yes, each one of these power stations have an excellent Smart app. Whether it's the Anker app, the Bluetti app, or the EcoFlow app, you do have the ability to upgrade the firmware and adjust settings for the power station, and I have no complaints about any of these apps. Now in the final comparison, we are going to break down the price per watt hour for each one of these power stations. So the Anker C1000, you can find this on their website for $599. That is 56 cents per watt hour. Looking on Bluetti's website, you can see the AC180 is priced at $579, which is 50 cents per watt hour, and the EcoFlow Delta 2 is priced at $569, which is 55 cents per watt hour. Now it's important to pay attention to the price per watt hour because if you look at the price alone, you can see they're very similar. However, the Bluetti AC180 has a larger battery, so you get more bang for your buck going with the AC180. Now these prices are really, really good. Usually products from the top 3 brands like Anker, Bluetti, and EcoFlow, you're going to pay around 80 to 85 cents per watt hour. But during the current sale, which is the early bird Prime Day sale, you can get quite the discount. Now you can save an additional $10 to $15 if you wait till actual Prime Day on July 16th or 17th. Well, now that we've completed the full comparison for each one of these power stations, we can tally up the points. So I'll throw this up on the screen so you guys can see. The Anker C1000 got a total of 7 points. The Bluetti AC180 got a total of 13 points. And the EcoFlow Delta 2 got a total of 9 points. Now, if you guys haven't seen my content in the past, I try to be as unbiased as possible. I don't really have a favorite power station brand. I always try to go for the one with the best performance. So even though these are so similar on paper, when we do an in-depth comparison like this, we can see which one has the advantages. And we can see that the Bluetti AC180 came out on top. And let me explain a little bit why that was. First off, this does have the largest battery, giving us the most usable capacity on the AC and DC output. What does that mean? It means you're going to get longer run times when you run a device off this one. The other thing was it came in at the best price per watt hour, 50 cents per watt hour on the current sale. Now, this also has very quiet fans versus the other two power stations, so whenever you're running this at a max load, the fans are going to be fairly quiet. This also has the fastest AC wall charging speed, and it supports dual charging, meaning you can charge from AC and DC input at the same time, and it gives a priority to solar or DC input first. And finally, this had the fastest UPS cutover time. So if you're looking to power your sensitive devices with an uninterrupted power supply, this is going to be the best bet. Now, you guys will have to let me know what you think about this head-to-head comparison. Now, each one of these power stations has their own advantages and disadvantages, and everyone has their own specific use case or even favorite brand. So the results of the video may be a little different than what you expected, but hey, do whatever you feel is right. Now, I'd love to get your guys' thoughts about this comparison. Which power station would you go with? I'll leave the links to each of these down in the video description so you guys can check them out. And don't forget that these prices are going to be really good during Prime Day. So make sure you pick one up if you're looking for the best price of the season, because usually that is during Prime Day sale. I really appreciate you guys watching to the end of the video. Please smash the thumbs up button if you like the content. I'll recommend a couple of the videos that you can check out if you're interested in my channel. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys in the next one.